Well, hey, Tribe, welcome back to another episode of Dare to Daydream. I am here with Dan Dunsmoor today. Danny, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gosh, Dan and I, we have so much in common growing up in a small town and both, moving away and, starting our own companies and just a guy that I've gotten to know closer and more over some crazy deep conversations we've had over the past 10 years of anywhere between life, kids, work, entrepreneurial dreams. So, Dan, thanks so much for joining me here today. I guess we'll start there. Is you grew up in a small town, southeastern Ohio, right? Shady Side.
That's right. Shady Side, Ohio. So roughly 2,000 people in the village. Um, I don't even think there's a one traffic signal in the town. So
Sounds like
Shady Side, Ohio.
sounds like a '90s country song, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
Um,
was. In hindsight, it was a wonderful place to grow up.
yeah, yeah, I can relate. It's There's nothing like going back home. And how many kids were in your graduating high school class?
79.
79. Okay. I think you got me beat. I think we had high 60s, low 70s, something like that. I guess I should. Yeah, that was you were quick fire that back. I can't quite
Yeah,
remember.
I get that question a lot when people ask me where I'm from, and I get that question a lot. It's you know, in those days, I could literally basically recite every single person in my class's phone number off the top of my head. So,
Hmm. I love that. I still do that. One of my best friends from home, Tony, every once in a while he'll just text me a phone number, and we'll try and go back and forth of like whose number was that, and I can still rattle off probably four or five of them. So can
yeah,
definitely.
it's an interesting place to grow up, man. Like it's hard to explain to people that haven't grown up in a small town, but that sense of community that comes with being a member of a small town is pretty special. We used to joke it's the whole town shows up. The whole town shows up to graduation. The entire town is there for high school football games. If
Mm-hmm.
somebody passes away, the entire town goes to the funeral. So there's something very special about that. And I've had a lot of friends, and I'm sure you have as well, that have moved back there actually after they've left. You certainly don't have the economic opportunities that you have like you do in a place like Columbus, Ohio. But there's something pretty special to be said about the people that grew up with a strong family in that environment, that you have generations that live in the same small town, and you've had the same friends. And I could go either way with that, the good and the bad, but for the most part, for a kid like me growing up, it was exactly what I needed.
Mm. Those humble beginnings, and I feel like there's something to that. And if I get in conversations with somebody here in Columbus, and they're in their 30s or 40s, it's almost like you can kind of after just a few minutes you can kind of pick them out in the wild. Who grew up in a small town and who has just that it thing about them, right? And that's really cool to hear that. I think we can definitely relate in the same upbringing. So then moving into college, that was a big step, right? Coming out of a small town, that was probably not the norm for most kids. The majority of, I would think, in your graduating class, and I know you've shared with me, even in your family, it was a pretty big deal for you to pick the next step of continuing education.
For sure. I mean, for me, like I get asked that question a lot. Is I get asked the question of, what helped me get to that next position in life, and it truly was my friends and the coaches that I had around me. So just to back up a little, I grew up in a family that didn't. I was the first person in my family that went to college, and it just wasn't a priority for me. My growing up, I literally don't remember my mother reading me one book even as a kid. You know, she was focused on other things like surviving.
Sure.
So I was very blessed to find sports at a young age, and in doing that, it taught me a lot of life lessons. I would say that's the biggest thing that happened to me as a kid was finding baseball, football, basketball, and just being a part of a team, because what that did was it taught me a lot of core values that I still carry with me today, such as hard work and accountability. But my friends actually pretty much all went to college. Like the group of people that I grew up with, like most of them did go on to college, and so I was very lucky to be surrounded by them and their families as I grew up.
Hmm. I want to share with the audience. You and I met for coffee, and this was over a month ago. And prior to us hopping on here, I was going back through my notes looking, and I love our coffee meetings because I will hear a quote and you'll be like, hang on a second. And you disappear in the conversation and you get your phone out or your pen and you start writing it, and same vice versa, right? And I remember you talking to me because we were talking about the podcast, and I said, Danny, I'm still listening, but I was just feverishly typing in my phone. And you were talking about your first day of college, and you said the first day of college feeling was that I don't belong here. I had this false fear that if they had parents that went to college, that they belonged here, and I didn't. They came from a better background than me. Maybe I just don't belong here. But then I thought, I'm right here, right now, next to them. We're all on the same page and the same starting line at the same time. And I thought, gosh, like that is what an amazing perspective that was somehow ingrained in you. And maybe it was the sports background, or maybe you could elaborate further, like where that mindset. But it's almost like you had this underdog mindset of I'm gonna I'm gonna wipe away the fears and the voices that this seat's not for me, but here I am. And could you talk a little bit about how did you get there, and do you remember that? Still remember that feeling of 20 probably years ago of those early days of that next level of trying to prove to yourself that you did have a seat at the table?
For sure, man. I mean, being a small town kid that came from, I was raised by a single mother, and the sacrifices that I had to make to get to that day, that first class at Ohio University, was it gave me an edge on for everything truly as I worked, and that edge has stayed with me throughout my life. But yeah, I mean, as a kid, I had this, like at a young age, I had this ability to visualize something that I wanted. And I would just remember, like, so the things that I wanted and value in life were really like predicated off of just knowing firsthand the things that I didn't want in life.
Mm,
And, growing up very poor, growing up in with a single mom, not having a dad around, it gave me this like perspective of the simple things in life are what I really craved and still do crave. It's the things that drove me as a kid were I didn't want to be poor when I grew up, and I could paint that picture in my mind of what that looked like. I wanted a warm and loving home, because that's something that is hard to explain to somebody that doesn't know the feeling of not having like that safe space to go to at the end of the day. And I would go to my friend's house as a kid and just have this feeling of like warmth and comfort, and I craved that, and I thought like that's what I want my family to have one day. And I would like fantasize about little things, like for example, I would see one of my friends passing baseball in the yard with their dad, and that's all I wanted in life was like the opportunity to do that. So I didn't have the opportunity to do that. But at a young age, I remember being like 10, 11 years old and thinking to myself, one day I hope I'm a dad. And,
yeah.
if I am a dad, then my kids will get that.
Oh, wow, that's
So
your priorities back then, even before all the success was already predetermined on family first, and
for sure.
that is
And to this day, that's what gives me the most energy. Like after a long day at work or whatever, I can go home and be with my wife and be with my kids, and it's the thing that I value most in the world is those moments with my family. And it just charges me up and it inspires me to be a better version of myself. But to that day, to get to that day at Ohio University, um, you've got to understand. So my mother made $11,000 a year when I was a kid. Like that
wow.
was where she topped out before I graduated high school, and I had two younger sisters and a brother. And so at a young age, I would just go to work and give my mom the money that I would make. I would work in a restaurant, even during football season when other kids would be like relaxing on the weekend. I was a busboy at a restaurant just so that I could help keep the lights on. So when I made that decision to go to school, it was just because I saw the opportunity that if I can improve my position just a little bit, different opportunities will present themselves for me. And it wasn't for me. Like that's one of the big things that as I reflect, one of the big takeaways for me has is that it just wasn't for me. I really wanted to help my family, and I wanted to show my siblings a different path in life that they didn't see before. So, like I remember vividly the day that I left my house to drive to school, and it was to this day the hardest thing I've ever done because in that moment I felt like I was leaving my siblings and I was leaving my mom, but I had the ability even as an 18-year-old to know I can help her more in 4 years or 5 years than I ever could today if I stay here and continue on the path that I'm on. So, so yeah, when first day of school, I'm sitting there looking around the room and all these kids have their straight teeth and their fancy clothes and I just felt so out of place. I like my immediate thought was I don't belong here. But then that turned into this motivation, like
Mm,
that day, like that in that class, it turned into this motivation of exactly what you just said, Michael, which was, no, I do belong here because I am here. And it doesn't matter how we got here, but we are at the same exact starting line right now. And it's up to me. And that was a huge lesson for me was now there's no excuses. There's no victim here. This is something that I can control, and I'm going to outwork everybody in this room.
mm.
That was my mentality.
Wow, that is powerful too. The hardest worker in the room, and that's it's funny because now all these years later, the version of Danny I know is you have three little girls and everything is about them, and Jess, your wife, and on the flip side is sometimes you're impossible to get hold of because when you're not with your family, right, you are still the hardest worker in the room. And I say that in a positive is you are so laser focused on what you want. And so it's cool to think that that selfless attitude back then of like, okay, if I have this sacrificial mindset of I can take care of my mom a little better if I have to step away for 4 or 5 years, and you kind of translate that into what you've built today. So that's thank you for sharing that. That's amazing, and kind of a good segue then into how you've built this career, which is what I really want to unpack next is sort of how you got here and some of the crossroads that you had to make here recently in your career. And I guess I'll start there, Dan. Did you know in college, maybe towards your junior or senior year, that I want to get into commercial real estate? I want to build a real estate empire, so to speak, but I want to become one of the voices in real estate in Ohio. Did you know back then, or were you just looking to get a job, survive, and then figure it out?
Man, great question. So this happened to me twice in my life. The first time I saw my wife, I was sitting in a stats class at Ohio University, and there was probably 200 people in the room. And she walked in the door, and I remember exactly what she was wearing. I remember everything about it because immediately, and she sat right in front of me. I went home that day and told one of my roommates, I saw the woman that I'm going to marry today. And I had never had a conversation with her before. But that happened. And then, have you ever been to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, sure have.
Man, coming through the tunnels into that city,
Yeah.
I was probably like 18 or 19 years old, something like that, the first time I went to Pittsburgh. And I came through those tunnels. And it was the first time in my life, believe it or not, as an 18-year-old kid. I lived in Shadyside, right?
Right.
The and didn't travel a whole lot as a kid. So the first time I saw a skyscraper in my life, I was 18 or 19 years old, and I came through that tunnel, and that city just like punched me in the face, and it just gives me chills telling you the story right now, even. And I just knew, I was like, that is what I want to do with my life. And I didn't even know what that meant. But what a skyscraper represented to me was something tangible that was really big and I knew was really just hard to do. And it just was my image of excellence in my mind of how can a person or how can a group of people build such a magnificent building? And I was fascinated by it truly. I mean, it grabbed me right away. And I had no idea how to get into commercial real estate. Didn't know one person in the commercial real estate world. And fortunately, one of my friends wrestled at Ohio State. I was in Columbus at a party with him one night, and a mutual friend that we have asked me. He said, "Hey, what do you want to do when you graduate college?" And I said, "One day I'm going to sell skyscrapers." And he's like, "Man, that's awesome. That's what my dad does." Really? And he linked me up with his dad, which is an amazing guy named Jeff Schwartz, based out of Boston, Massachusetts. And at the time, by chance, he was the one of the top investment sale brokers in the United States, selling skyscrapers across the country. And I reached out to Jeff and said, "Hey, your son, I'm friends with Brian. I'd love to just pick your brain." And he responded immediately and said, "Hey, if you're a friend of my son, if you're one of my son's friends, you're one of my friends. So I'll help you any way that I can." And he linked me up with a couple of other guys, and he gave me some just incredible advice at a young age. And the first piece of advice was, where do you want to live? Pick a city. If you want to be in real estate, you really have to understand the landscape of whatever market you want to be an expert in. So I was between Chicago and Columbus, and I decided to move to Columbus because it was close to my family. Like I wanted to go to my little brother's high school football games and just be close to the family. So he said, "Okay, so now do you have any connections in Columbus?" And I didn't know anybody that lived in Columbus. So he basically just gave me a list of companies. He said Colliers International, CB Richard Ellis, Jones Lang LaSalle, and was just going down the list of the largest commercial real estate firms. And he said, if I were you, I would start trying to network to make inroads with one of these companies. And so I did. And how that ended was I cold called a guy named Rich Shewan, who is the founder of Colliers in Columbus, Ohio, which is now the largest commercial real estate firm in Ohio. But I cold called Rich and I said, "Rich, my name's Danny Dunsmoor. I'm a junior finance major at Ohio University. And one day I'm going to sell skyscrapers. I'd love to come take you to lunch." And he started laughing and said, "Okay, Danny, where are you from?" And I told him I'm from Shadyside, Ohio. And he started laughing and said, "What's the tallest building in Shadyside, Ohio?" And I had to think about that for a minute and said, I don't know, maybe my high school. So he said, all right, man, come to Columbus and take me to lunch. And he hired me. So
Wow.
right out of college, I graduated on a Friday. Monday morning, I started working with Rich and his team, and I was there for 16 years, and it was amazing. And I learned so much from him and so much from the entire team there, which made it very, very difficult for me to leave when I did last year. But um, to this day, Rich tells me he's one of my biggest fans and respects me setting out on my own. But yeah, man, that's how I got into it.
Wow. It's funny. It's they say when you are purchasing a car, you never notice a red Toyota till you're wanting to buy a red Toyota, right? Then they're everywhere. And when I first met you 10 years ago, probably, oh, Danny, what do you do? I'm in commercial real estate. And it was like every building I drove by, I'm like, gosh, there's Danny's. So I would take pictures and send them to you. Just so many of your buildings. And then I realized, oh, he's got a bunch of them. And then, I would see something on LinkedIn or see an ad pop up or see something in Business First. I'm like, Danny's everywhere. I started to notice it. So it was really cool as we, first met that long ago to watch your success. And that's my next question for you is I know when you're behind the scenes and in the trenches, especially a kid coming out of college, there's so much that people don't realize that hard work and just dedication and, three steps back to one step forward type, seasons in life. But did your success come faster than you thought it might?
No, no. The first 2 years, um, I just had the right mindset. I would say the first 2 years in the industry, I didn't make any money. Was like literally had to borrow change from my girlfriend, now wife, just to park my car downtown. I mean, I literally was just completely broke. But it was amazing because I didn't view it as that. I saw it as getting my master's degree in commercial real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And I just took that like student mindset every day of it's okay that some of my friends are, working at a bank or they're doing whatever and they're already making, pretty good money right out of college. I didn't care about that. I just wanted to learn the business, and I just knew that all the other benefits of being really good at something would come. But yeah, I would say the first 2 to 3 years were very, very difficult. And then it started to snowball pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It was a pretty, flat line at first, and then it took off pretty fast from there. But I wouldn't trade those days for anything because I learned so much about the business and constantly challenge myself now to this day just to go back to those fundamentals that I learned then. um, I would say the best thing that happened to me and the advice that I do, because I just like Jeff Schwartz did to me, every single time somebody reaches out to me and asks me, like a kid in college asks to go to coffee or asks for advice or whatever, I always make time for that because it changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
But the piece of advice that I give to young people when they're going into the business world is the lesson that I learned from growing up in a small town, which is that sense of community is everything. So focus on the people. Everything else will come, but I was very lucky because I was surrounded by just wonderful people that cared about me early on in my career. And that's something that we at my firm now, it's something that we very much value is that wolf pack mentality. And as a young person, you need that. You need a mentor that isn't going to just leverage you to make more money for themselves, but somebody that genuinely cares about you in terms of providing access to opportunities that you probably aren't qualified to get in front of yet, but also helping you learn without any expectation of financial gain for themselves. it's that comes from developing really strong talent. The financial gain comes from that. But as a young person, if I was a lone wolf and just in this industry on my own, it would have been very difficult to survive. I mean, it's commercial real estate, just like so many other businesses and sports or whatever. It's so competitive and it's so dynamic and it moves very fast, but it also moves very slow in terms of the deal cycle. So it's very hard to make it. And that's the biggest thing is just being surrounded. I think not just in real estate, just in business in general, being surrounded by people that actually care about you.
Hmm. Gosh, if this isn't a story that people shouldn't latch on to about believing in yourself, because I'm doing the math in my head. So there you are going into your late 20s and you use the word snowball. So the career is finally getting going and you're in the trenches for a few years out of college. But on the flip side, that girl that walked in that class with 200 people is now your wife. So you called your shot both with the girl and the career. I'm going to sell skyscrapers someday. I'm going to get this girl's going to be my wife. And here you are, late 20s. Do you ever sometimes think back and go, wow, that's wild. I was two for two there.
Man, I joke with my wife all the time. I tell her all the time. I just look at her and say, I can't believe you're my wife. And she thinks I'm joking, but I'm very serious. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's an amazing for so many reasons because think about it, when she just believed in me all the time. And Rich Schuan actually told me when I first started working with him, he said the two most important things that you ever do in your life are where you work because that's where you spend the most of your time, and who you marry because that will determine your level of happiness. And I've been so lucky because think about it. Right out of college, my wife is seeing all these other guys that she could have been with, like driving nice cars and not borrowing quarters off of her to park downtown, right? But she just believed in me and
Wow.
she just knew how passionate and how focused I was. And then fast forward to last year when I was 39 years old with three kids and had this just phenomenal career. And I came home one day and said, Hey, Jess, everything that I just built for the last 16 years, I'm going to blow it up because I have this dream of going and starting something new from scratch. And that moment right there was another just representation of why I'm so lucky because my wife just looked at me and said, I believe in you.
Wow.
She could have said, Are you insane? Like, life's pretty good right now. What the hell are you doing? It's just
Sure.
so lucky to, I mean, it's because without that, um, that warmth that I talked about earlier to come home to and that love and support, it's very difficult to do, hard things and chase dreams when you don't have the support. So
Sure.
I'm very lucky to have that.
Sure. Well, that's beautiful. I love that progression of just, stuck by you both times, right? When it was nothing up until I don't know, the view's pretty nice up here, Danny. Sure you want to do this, but so let's kind of dive into that part then because you and I had this discussion, gosh, 7 or 8 years ago. And I remember you said, I think I'm gonna start my own company. And I was like, do it. I knew you well enough by then. I was like, I go, launch it. And it wasn't, I don't know that I ever felt the sense that you were too afraid or that fear was a huge factor. But I know just you were still building the career. And you said earlier, like being a lone wolf. And I think you had such a intuitive knack for the timing of it, looking back. Kind of take me through that. Was that a tough transition to just be sitting there with this dream for 7 or 8 years? And the harder it probably was to think about, I guess, the more, kid one, then kid two, then kid three, and more success and stuff in life, the further that ball got, down the road, was it harder to make this decision to when did you eventually just be like, I got to rip the band-aid. This dream's just tapping me on the shoulder. I just got to go. Like, what was it? What was that transition like?
Very difficult. I would say it was very difficult for all the reasons that you just mentioned, but I just knew in my heart and in my gut that this is just who I am. And that was the kind of the turning point for me when I came to that realization. I work with a coach, Doug Brackman, who wrote an amazing book called Driven, and Doug has been just incredible to have in my corner. He's helped me through so many things in life during the past year and a half working with him, um, such as just finding my version of God. If you had asked me a year and a half ago if I believed in God, I would have told you no. Helping me be brave enough to remove alcohol from my life. Doug and my wife were both instrumental in that. And then the business was the big thing when Doug really just helped me understand it's just who you are. And what he meant by that was I'll never be happy unless I like fully happy unless I try. So it just wasn't about the money for me. The money is an interesting thing to talk about, though, because I mentioned earlier that it was a key driver for me in my life when I was younger, because one of the primary focuses was I just don't want to be poor. So early in my career, I absolutely cared about money. And I cared about all the awards, and I cared about the newspaper articles and everything, because that was more of this like outward ego of just proving that I belong here. I was still living with that imposter syndrome that I felt like I had to constantly just speak to of I belong here. See, I was in the newspaper yesterday. I belong. I just sold this building and made a bunch of money. And when I had that realization that money no longer controlled me, it's a very similar experience to alcohol doesn't control me. When I used to go to business meetings, I would just obsess over it. Like, am I going to drink? Am I not going to drink? If I do drink, then I'm not going to be able to wake up early and feel good and work out. If I do drink, I'm not going to be able to wake up early and have a bunch of energy for my kids. But it's going to be so much fun, and it's just this constant like ping pong match in my mind. And once I removed that, it was roughly 90 days later, 120 days later, something like that. And it was that power of, wow, I have no interest in alcohol. I can go sit at a dinner and it doesn't even like, I don't get that feeling or that sense that I need to do that to belong here. Money was the same thing for me, where when I realized that sure, money's important, but it's fuel to do the things that I want to do with my family and provide a life that I want to provide for my family. But it doesn't it doesn't drive me anymore. It's not the reason that I work hard anymore. That was another big thing that I wasn't ready for 7 or 8 years ago, because I was still very focused on money at that time.
Sure. No, I think you and I spoke about this before too, where I feel like when you get older, it's not everybody goes through it. And this is one of the, I think, connections that you and I have is it's, as you mentioned, it's a fuel, it's a how, it's a tool to get experiences over things, right? And if it's, I can use money, excuse me, to take my kids to go do something cool versus like give them things that they're not going to remember. And so it's refreshing to hear. Danny, do you think there's a shift going on? Again, I know not everybody thinks this, but and maybe I just drink from the same Kool Aid. But do you think there's a shift going on in business where people are starting to realize that ego is a big factor, and are we dropping our egos a little bit? Do you see it? in the world of not just commercial real estate, but you work with so many investors and just so many business owners because your business isn't just tied to commercial real estate; it's tied to your tenants, and those tenants are dozens and dozens of different types of companies, and so you run into all sorts of egos. Do you see it? People having that awareness now of dropping the ego a little bit and just be more understanding of we're all humans in this business world. Do you see it getting worse? Is it just such a loaded question like it always has been where you're going to run into like your mentors that you mentioned, right? Like the guy that says, hey, where you want to live and how tall is the tallest building and I'll take you to my wing and teach you how to do this compared to, you mentioned Doug Brackman's book and he focused on some of that, like how we are wired. But where do you see that coming into play in today's business world?
That's a great question, and it is. It's just case by case. I mean, I just deal with it as you mentioned. It's one of my things that I love the most about what I do for a living is I get to work with so many people in terms of that have major political roles in the city, attorneys, engineers, architects, investors, bankers, CEOs of all sorts of different companies. And I would say that there's definitely more people that are less focused on themselves than I've ever seen. I grew up in a very competitive industry in commercial real estate where it's very nice suits, very nice cars, very nice watches, very nice houses. And these are all status symbols, right? And I definitely see less focus on that more and more focus on people. I see more people that genuinely care about their people,
Mm,
that really care about the welfare of their employees.
mm-hmm,
I was just with, and I know you know him pretty well as well, but Joel Furno is a very close friend of mine.
mm-hmm,
He's just a great example of this, right? Of a leader of a company that doesn't have to, but does care tremendously about his people. He, Joel runs a company called Citron that has roughly 800 employees. And I was at breakfast with him last week and just asking him what he's focused on and what he does with his role. And everything that he mentioned was all about just improving the lives of his people. And that's his mission is he wants, if you work at Citron, he wants your life to be improved by that. So he's a great case study of the type of person that I'm talking about. And I definitely see more and more of that in the business community right now, where people like Kaufman, for example, that offers a monthly wellness stipend, where if you run a race or if you have a gym membership or whatever it is, they'll reimburse you for a certain amount every month. And it's not just the money, but it's what that money represents, which is we care about you. We care about your health and your wellness. And so I do see a lot of that. I also see a lot of like mental health focus right now, where business leaders are providing access to therapy and access to retreats and just education in terms of just helping just deal with the anxiety, depression, all the just quieting the monkeys, right?
sure.
And I do see a lot of that more than I ever have today.
My friend Janie Wiseman, who I know you know Janie as well, she says company culture eats strategy for breakfast every time, every day. And I think that's so true, right? Is if we're all in this umbrella for the same reasons and everybody's on the right bus on the right seat and it's going the direction as a whole, strategy takes second place because we all have to be together as a unit to accomplish that. So such a beautiful thing to hear you elaborate on. And so now we got to know the story goes right into this past year. This was the pivotal moment, right? You had this dream that wouldn't leave you alone after 16 years, and you go to your wife and say, I'm going to blow it all up. So this is your first year in. How's it going? And what was that first day like? What was the night before telling this huge real estate firm that you had worked for and built this partnership for? I'm out. I'm leaving. I'm gonna go it alone. And what were some of those? And I know you could probably say maybe it's still the early days, but even just those first few weeks, those first couple months, was there a sense of loneliness, like I'm on an island and what am I doing? Was there self doubt? What was all that like in the beginning?
It was very difficult because of the people. Um, so in terms of self doubt, I never had. I was at a point where it was more of a soul level decision for me, which was this is just my path in life, and for an array of reasons of things that I saw a lot of opportunity in things that I really wanted to do differently. Um, and I wanted that challenge and that responsibility of really having a tremendous amount of influence over the culture and the people and being of service. I just felt like this role for me, it's the right time for it because of where all the work that I've done with myself. I genuinely believe that I can help people and I can be of service, not just externally to clients. Like I genuinely believe we are phenomenal at what we do. But for me, it's just that opportunity to be of service to the entire team and help them be the best leasing agents or the best capital markets team or the best at marketing or whatever I can do to deploy resources to help. I'm in a position right now where I can really do that. And that was a major thing for me. But to your question, it was, I haven't felt anxiety since I was a kid, truly. Like, I mean, it was very difficult because I love Rich Schuen and I love the people that I worked with. So it's all the things that make it difficult as an adult. I mean, it's one thing if you start a company when you're just young without a tremendous amount of responsibility, and I have tremendous respect for that. I mean, it's hard no matter when you do it, but to be 39 years old and have three kids and a wife and all the responsibilities that come with that, that's one reason that a lot of people don't chase that dream. But another reason is I was pretty happy, truly. Like I had a very good setup with Colliers. I mean, they're the best. I mean, in my opinion, it's the best by a long shot, the best large commercial real estate service organization in the state of Ohio. And um, and deeper than that, though, it's just the connectivity to the people, like the guy that sat to my immediate right, the guy that sat to my immediate left. I've I spent 16 years with them, and I know their kids. I've been on vacation with them, and it was very difficult to walk away from those relationships from the standpoint that I was intentionally leaving a very good situation with very good people to go chase this dream over here. And for all those reasons, it just made it very, very difficult that to the point where if I wasn't so just pulled, it was like a magnetic force of like, I have to do this. And fortunately, I have very good partners. Like, so I have a few partners that just by chance they were also in transition um, for various different reasons and for to do different things. But somehow our paths just kind of came together, and so we did it together. And there was four of us that initially started this firm, which really helped as well, just to have an immediate wolf pack and have just those people in the foxhole with me right away. But nevertheless, very, very difficult to make that decision and to make that move Um, and then just to take the risk. I mean, the risk is unbelievable. You know this.
Sure.
You start companies all the time. This is what you do. People like you are crazy, man. Like this is uh, it's a unique risk tolerance that you have to really have, I think. But it's when you really believe in something, like I do believe in this wholeheartedly. There's no thought that it can fail. I mean, sure, it can fail, but to me, there's no possibility of that happening. And I can only see, just like when I was a kid and visualizing this better life for myself 10 or 20 years from now, and visualizing passing baseball with my son or daughter in the yard and living in an actual house. Like I didn't live in a house until I was 28 years old. Like it was trailers and apartments and whatnot, but I always knew that I would. And it's the same exact ability that I had then is now, which is sure it's challenging to start a business, but all I see is 5 years from now and 10 years from now. And I see all the people around me, what they are doing in 5 or 10 years. I see them not for who they are today, but the potential that they have. And my job is simply just to help them reach that potential. So it's so for all the things that made this extremely difficult to do, they're offset by all the positive things that I'm just so passionate about. And again, it's just who I am.
Mm, that's so powerful. Get me excited over here. I'm gonna like go start a company with you now, I think.
You're going to have a new business launch by tomorrow afternoon.
uh, wouldn't take long for you and I. Dan, you talked about anxiety, and I want to, as we're sort of wrapping up here, I want to talk about lifestyle and how there's this awareness now in, it's kind of like we talked about earlier is experiences over things and what you view success in. But with that awareness, and you talked about, cutting out alcohol and just the lifestyle changes that you've had to combat some of those. Uh, what does your meditation practice look like? I want to just touch briefly on that because I know it's helped me a ton. And if you would have told me, and I think this is again a synergy here, a somewhat similarity of you and I coming from small towns, but not even that, just growing up not really understanding what meditation was or what it could do, but even if it's just for 10 minutes a day, quieting the mind, and how does that help translate into being a better husband, father, business leader? And what are some other tools are you using? I know you have the cold plunge in your basement, but what do you use as tools that are essentially free? I know a cold plunge costs money, but it's a lifestyle decision to wake up and say, this is what I'm going to do today. This may be hard. The cold plunge may be hard. Gosh, I do not feel like sitting for 8 minutes today or 10 minutes or 11 minutes in this meditation. I'm going to do it anyways. And how are some of those tools that you're using? How do those help in the business world?
Um, I, so for me, I guess it's I just don't negotiate with myself at all
Mm,
because I have the understanding of the central nervous system, which is a constant mission of mine to calm, because in reality, I know I'm a maniac. I know that I'm extremely intense. I know that I'm extremely driven. I'm all the things that can be good can also be extremely bad because my mind is also in 50 different places at the same exact time, and it's very difficult for me historically just to focus and be present. It was something that I struggled with my entire life. um, so roughly in 2018 I was introduced to meditation. A friend of mine gave me a book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and I read that book, and it changed my life because it was the first time that I really understood what meditation was and why I would do it. And so I built up, and I'm constantly refining this, but I've built a practice of things that I do every single day that I know have a major benefit to everything in life. Because to me, it's all just one thing. It's all one experience with my family, at work, and I've built this practice that I just don't negotiate with myself at all about. I don't let the monkeys in my mind talk me out of getting in that cold water every day, or to not sit and journal, or to not sit in prayer. So for me, it's every single day at 5 o'clock in the morning. I start from 5 to 6 o'clock in the morning. I have that power hour where I I have my gratefulness practice where I it's prayer. Then I do roughly 10 minutes of meditation. Then I journal. Then I visualize the day. And then on a whiteboard in my office at my house, I have all of my goals written down, and it's in the different buckets um, for my life of friends, finance, fitness, fun, faith. And so I have those goals on the board, and I look at them every single morning. So that just period of time just kind of sets me up for the day. And I used to do the cold plunge in the morning just to give me more energy in the morning, but I don't really need that. Like I've found that 5 to 6 mental exercise is enough. And then it's from 6 to 7, I do some physical exercise every day. So, but I train my mind just like I train my body. And I didn't it before 2018 when I first started getting into that, I didn't appreciate the control that I do have over my mind. And that's something that I've been working very hard to hone in. And then now another part of my practice is every day, as soon as I walk in the door at the end of a day, if I get home at 4:30, 5:30, whatever, the first thing I do is just go straight downstairs and jump in that 39-degree water for 3 minutes. And I do that because it's, for me personally, it's the perfect way to just reset my central nervous system, and to draw that hard line from all the business activities that I was doing throughout the day to now it's time to be a dad and a husband.
Wow.
And I get that huge dopamine spike from once you get out of the cold water, and then I'm just, it doesn't matter. I could be so tired, and I do that, and I get out, and so that's the thing is the energy. And that's another reason that I removed alcohol, is because I'm just obsessed with feeling good, because my life's crazy. I have 3 kids running in every direction, and a wife that I love, and the friends and the business. I just can't afford to be operating at 40%. So I never want to be a half-assed version of myself. It's always, how do I make sure I do everything I can through diet and through all the work that I do to just feel good. Because if I feel good, then I can operate at a higher level and be more focused. But through that meditation practice, Michael, it's helped me understand a lot of things, but it's helped me understand myself, helped me understand that usually the answer is inside of me. And what I mean by that is, if I'm feeling anger or feeling some emotion, I can feel that and understand that it's an emotion. And because I have that ability to detach from my body almost, I can understand when I'm stressed out. I can know when my mind's racing, and just kind of bring it back to right now. Because like Doug Brackman says to me all the time, is God is in the presence.
Mm,
And if I'm here right now, there is no fear. Fear doesn't exist in the present. There's no anxiety. There's no depression. No what ifs I did that different. It's just I'm here right now.
mhm.
And that understanding of there are no ordinary moments. Every single moment's a gift. So it can be the simplest thing, like a conversation with my daughter, with one of my daughters, and meditation has given me that ability to actually be there, rather than my mind thinking about some real estate deal or something like that when I'm trying to help a 5-year-old learn how to tie her shoes.
Mm, wow. I'm still thinking about the cold plunge in the evening. What a great idea. And I totally get it because it does. It gives you that reset. And, I've had discussions about the nervous system and I could talk for a whole episode on it because I've read so much about it and I still have a ton of questions about it and love to get other people's opinions on it. But what a great idea. And I would challenge our listeners who are into cold therapy to take your advice on that one. That's an awesome reset from coming home and, hey, instead of grabbing that drink, maybe just reset, even if you don't have, like, go stay in the shower, a cold shower for a minute or two. And it probably makes you feel like you're starting the day over. So thanks for
For
sharing
sure.
that. Danny, I have two final questions for you. My first one is, what's one thing you've learned about yourself as you've gone through this experience? And I guess I'll kind of customize that for you is as you've gone through this experience of this change, this entrepreneurial change of everything we talked about here in the back half of this conversation of starting your own company. What's one thing that Dan Dunsmoor has learned about himself?
Um, the biggest thing that's kind of near and dear to me is just the appreciation for opportunity and the ability to see it. So going back to growing up in a small town, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I can relate that to people that are growing up in poverty or just surrounded by people that you just don't know how far you really can go. And what I've learned is every time I slowly made a small improvement, more opportunities have opened up in my life. And that could be something so simple as just trying a little bit harder in school or doing a little bit better with a relationship or whatever it is. Every time I've improved my position just a little bit, I've noticed that there's more opportunities. And so to tie that to the business, when I was 25 years old, I didn't have that opportunity to just really branch out and do it the way that I just did it. I could have done it, but it would have looked much different. Um, so that's one of the pieces of advice that I share all the time with people is, just slowly put yourself in a better position and keep your eyes open and see what opportunities are out there and understand that the more you advance, the more opportunities will present themselves. And I'd say that that's one of the things that was reinforced throughout this was, man, what a great opportunity to do this now with these amazing people. And now look at the opportunity that we have in front of us to really build something special and to do something different than others are doing it and really just do it our way. And so now I just see everything as opportunity. I really do. And the 15-year-old version of myself thought that the best opportunity that I had in life was to work in a steel mill. And fortunately, I've just kept my eyes open throughout this journey and just seen I've been able to see the different things in front of me and chase the ones that I wanted.
I love it. Dan, last question for you. What advice would you give to someone who's hearing the whisper of a dream, a path in life that just seems too crazy to chase?
Oh man, that's a good one. I mean, it really is. To me, it's not about what you achieve, but how happy you are. So there's a big difference there. I mean, you could go on to be the best lawyer that Columbus, Ohio has ever seen and win all the awards and be miserable. And I know people like that make a tremendous amount of money and they're not happy. But if you're doing something that you really love that's going to fulfill you every day, and I know people say this all the time, but it's just not work. It's not work for me to come to this office every day because I love it. I love the mission, the path. I love the path that I'm on and the mission that we are looking to execute. And that could be anything. I mean, you could be selling cotton candy, you could be doing anything, right? I mean, and if that's the thing that's gonna bring you joy and happiness, that's to me what it's all about. It's just that's the ultimate level of success to me, is just being happy in life. And that's different for everybody, but and it may be chasing that crazy dream that may feel very risky, but one of the things that I do often, it's a great exercise to do, is think about the advice that the 80-year-old version of yourself would give you today.
Mm,
If you really think about that, like when you're 80 years old, think of all the people that you will have lost, all the things that you could have done, and now you open your eyes and you just jumped into a time machine and you're here right now. And I think that's a really good way to give some perspective, because that 80-year-old version of yourself may say, go do it. Go do it now.
hmm Yeah. Wow. Dan, thank you so much for being here today. I am going to replay this one several times. And much like every time you and I get together, I replay our conversation, I feel like over and over again, because every time I spend a little bit of time with you, I'm so grateful for the outlook you have on life, the positivity, and you said it before. You focus on the opportunities and what the positive is, not the alternative. So thank you for choosing to live your life like that, sharing that perspective with the rest of us, and thank you so much again for being here today with me.
Thank you, Michael, and congrats on this podcast. And it's been a lot of fun, man. Thank you.